Hey, good evening. Today's Bible study comes from the book of Mark, chapter 5, verses 21 through 34, and it reads as follows. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders named Jairus came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. A large crowd followed and pressed around him, and a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once Jesus realized that the power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Now, this is one of my favorite miracles that Jesus did, because it was a twofold miracle. One was behind the other. And it starts off when Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake. Once again, a large crowd was gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue leaders, and this was a big thing for a synagogue leader to come up, his name was Jairus, came, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet. Wow, this was big because Jairus had to show some humility and some humbleness. And don't forget, he was, as it stated, a synagogue leader. And for him to do this, knowing that mm, uh, it was a struggle or a heartbreak, something was really big in him that was crushing his soul, and probably made his peers angry for doing this, because he humbled himself before the Lord. Um, but the blessing was rewarded in his plea, as we'll see later. But this was a big thing for a synagogue leader to come and get in front of Jesus and fell at his feet. He pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying." Uh-oh, there's a situation. His daughter was dying, and knowing that he couldn't do anything, knowing that he didn't have the power to do anything, he must have heard and known about Jesus. And he must have had some faith, because if you look at the next part of this verse, it says, "Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." Uh-oh. So he knew. He knew about Jesus' power. And he was smart to come and bow before him. But you know what? Jesus went with him. Jesus was always working. So a large crowd followed and pressed around him. And in the midst of him going to Jairus' house, in verse 25, it says, a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She was ailing. She had this bleeding that wouldn't go away for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal, and she was under the care of doctors, and they couldn't do anything for her. And she spent all that she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. Uh-oh, here's a faith step, because the doctor couldn't heal me, but man, there's a faith step because I'm coming to the Lord and seeking his healing. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. Listen to what her thoughts were. "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." This is a huge faith situation. She didn't get anything out of the doctors. She spent up all her money. And the only thought she had was, "If I just touch his clothes." Not that he has to touch me, not that he has to talk to me. All I got to do is touch something that is touching him, and I will be healed. His power will heal me. And when she did it, immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. Uh-oh, she was healed just by touching her. But look at what Jesus does, and everybody's wondering, well, didn't Jesus notice? It says that once Jesus realized that power had gone out of him, he knew power was gone. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" Now, this isn't a question that Jesus didn't know the answer to. He was looking for this daughter of the Lord to step up because she had done something amazing herself. And you're going to see where Jesus rewards her. Not even after, I should say, she was healed, he says, "You see the people crowding against you." His disciples didn't know what to say. His disciples answered, "And yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" See, the disciples did not know the power. They did not know that somebody with great faith had touched Christ and that he felt power go to faith. God's power comes through us through our faith, and it went somewhere, and he knew of this. So he said, but Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. He already knew who had done it. If he didn't know, he wouldn't have asked the question. But it wasn't a question for him. It was a question for her. It was a question to show the disciples something also, and the crowd. Because you notice the disciples were lost with the thought of it when they said, his disciples answered, "And yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" Hey, they didn't know. They didn't know how his power was working. The crowd didn't know the miracle that had happened just from him being touched. And the one of great faith didn't know that the Lord knew of her great faith, because she said, "If only I could touch." But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, that she was healed immediately in her body, as she said, came and fell at his feet. She came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, she was scared. And we all probably would have been scared, because we would have said, "How did he know it was me with all these people here?" But she was scared, and she didn't need to be. Told him the whole truth. She told him what had happened. She had a fear. She was suffering, and she came and just said, "If I just touch you." But look at Jesus' loving self. Look at Jesus with his compassionate self. Look at Jesus showing how we should be with all folks. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. You had the faith in me, and you came and touched my clothes." And then he says, "Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." So not only did she feel it, not only did she touch him, but she also got validated by Christ. And he said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." Do you know how strong her faith had to have been just to touch him, and then to hear him say, "Daughter, your faith has healed you"? Boy, it just got bigger, and she probably got so much stronger in the Lord and bragged on him after that. And then he said, "Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." So she didn't have any more suffering. That was the miracle inside of him going to Jairus' house to heal his daughter, which we will talk about in our next Bible study. Amen.